Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. This is a weekly program that I provide and host that's sponsored by V2R, and its purpose is to share information about funding and entrepreneurship. What we want to do is try to help entrepreneurs raise more funding. We try to help investors find those entrepreneurs who are telling their pitch correctly, and all in all, our goal is to advance innovation by providing better funding. That's the new slogan for V2R. We're going to stick with it for at least another day or two before we decide maybe we'll try something else. Today, I have with me as my guest Emiliano Del Laurentiis. He is the CEO and founder of Knowledge Avatars, which is an edtech platform that he has been working on forever. And I checked my calendar, and I've been working with him now for 7 years. And his work with AI and education far precedes my appearance or involvement or interference, however you want to look at that. And there are a lot of things that we want to talk about today, but we've reached a new milestone. Emiliano has reached a new milestone, which I'm trying to take advantage of, which is with the presentation of realistic characters. And so I'm going to give you a short introduction here to Ben, who is the one I'm working with. And here's Ben showing up in the screen, and I'm going to do a little adjustment here to make him a little more visible to everyone. And bring him up in the screen. And this is Ben. This is an AI simulation of the historic character of Benjamin Franklin. And Ben, I'm going to ask you to say hello to the Successful Funding crowd.
My hearty greetings to the Successful Funding crowd. I am delighted to be amongst such enterprising souls who join capital with ingenuity and public purpose. May your ventures prosper and your good works multiply.
So we'll come back to Ben in a moment, but this is Ben, and this is a very recent advance over many, many advances. Emiliano, this is a good time for you to share with the audience a little bit more about who you are and the long, we'll call it entrepreneurial adventure that you've had with AI and education.
Thank you, Carl. It's a great pleasure being here on the show with you. First of all, I have to point out that I misspelled my own name. I have an A at the end instead of an S. So anybody that's wondering, they'll know that it's a typo. It is IIS. So the journey really started such a long time ago, or it really started in the 80s. And in the 80s, the whole idea was to make learning much more personable, but also more interactive and adaptive. So that any student or anybody who wants to learn anything, that they have a much more personal experience with the entity, and the essentially the digital twin or the coach that they have created. And we've gotten now to a point where the milestone isn't just the realistic character, but our system is scalable. There are other realistic characters out there, but ours is scalable, meaning that you can afford to have millions of people using it at the same time. So that is one thing. But the other thing is that our system has a pedagogical built-in system, so it knows how to teach, and and allows you to train it with your own knowledge. Our goal is for not just to create an AI that accesses OpenAI's content, trillions of pieces of information there, or Claude's or Gemini. That is not the goal here. We use that technology to make our system smarter, but it is using the knowledge and the skills of the person who trains it. So for example, your coach, your entity, your knowledge avatar will have your expertise. And I think that is what we want to do. We want to empower coaches and teachers to expand their abilities and to expand to empower them to scale their expertise. That's our new slogan, by the way. So so that is really what we are here all about. This is what we're all about, to help people scale their own expertise so that they can either coach when they are not available, or their entity, their knowledge avatar can meet the needs of their clients. And of course, that means that the coach or the teacher can handle more people more effectively with more depth. So that's the bottom line.
Let's take a spin with that. So when I first started working with knowledge avatars, one of the first things I did was I set up an avatar that was somewhat a similarity to myself, or a replica of myself, called Cap. And it's currently available on my website at dakincapital.com. And I trained it in my understanding of startup funding and capital formation. And this is a very important, of several important points that I want to make in today's presentation, that right now, if you go to the internet and you use any of the large LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude on Anthropic, or Gemini on Chrome, what it's going to do when you give it a prompt, when you ask it a question, is it's going to give you an answer. And when you get the answer, because you asked the question, you're making an assumption that it's answering you. It's not. It's what it's doing is it's taking all the information it's been trained on, and it's creating an average answer that looks like the average question that it thought you asked. And it may have the appearance of being correct. It may actually be correct in response to the question you asked. But the problem is that it may not be correct. And by this, I'm not talking about hallucinations. I'm simply saying that it's taking a consensus of all the readings, all the materials everywhere, and it's creating an average answer to your question, which may be off target.
Not only that, you don't know what the source is, right? So if you ask OpenAI or Claude or any of these other systems a question, it'll come up with an answer. It may be a correct answer, but you don't really know what the source is. And it's mining Reddit, and it's mining Wikipedia, and it's mining websites, and all of that information is put into one huge pile, right? So the difference. So if you want to have information, if you want to get results that are verified and are authoritarian, then you want to be able to know the source, and that is what we can offer. Is that if you train it about with your knowledge, it is Carl Dakin's knowledge that is being represented and coming out. Now, if you're wrong, it's because Carl Dakin is wrong, but that's a whole different thing.
But that is a whole different thing.
At least the person can argue with you. That was what Socrates, the philosopher, not the sorcerer, but Socrates, the philosopher, disliked the idea of books because you could not argue with a book.
Right. So this is a very important point, because what I found when I was asking general prompts of the different LLMs, it was giving me an answer that sounded correct, but for a startup business, one that might be pre-revenue, one's looking for their first funding, the answer was almost always wrong. The answer would be more correct for a company that had been in existence for 3 years, had a lot of sales under its belt, might be doing quite well, but clearly an established, more mature business, which would be attractive to a private equity company, maybe even a venture capitalist, certainly something that an angel investor could look at and respond to. But when you're just out of the gate, when you're just telling your story for the first time to the world, the answers are wrong. It's not the way you tell your story. It's not the content you put into your story. So I started training my avatar Cap on the thinking of first funding, of getting pre-revenue funding, all the different things, all the different challenges, all of the additional challenges of telling your story to raise funding, and understanding at the same time that I wasn't talking to the entire world of investors. I was only talking to those who are the early adopters, those who understand high risk, those who are looking for different things, and changed the tone, the quality, the content, everything in CAP tells you when you ask CAP a question is coming at it not from a generic consensus standpoint. It's coming at it from where you as an entrepreneur need to be if you're going to raise your first dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's an important point, and I think that is where Knowledge Avatars distinguishes itself. Now we have different the idea of having a character with a voice that is really about making it personable and making it and allowing people to relate to it more. We also have 3D, what I call 3D stylistic avatars. That so if somebody doesn't want the system to look too much like themselves, but to have some kind of a character, they could choose that as well, or they could choose to have no character at all and just have text, which is fine. And once you train your avatar, the brain is the same. So the brain that you train is the same whether or not you're using an avatar or not using an avatar, whether or not you're using the 3D stylistic ones or the realistic avatars. And then we give you a link to a widget that is automatically developed, and that widget can be on your phone, or you could share that link so that your customers can get it on their phone or on their computer, or you can embed it using an iframe, very simple code embedded on your website. And a lot of people are now beginning to, we're developing affiliates who are embedding it into their LMSs, or they're embedding it into their behind the paywall so that their customers can have access to their knowledge while they are away or not available.
It's very important once you start putting all your information into an AI avatar that you have access to it wherever you happen to be, or your customers or your employees or anyone you're working with who you want to have access to that information. And so the ability to take basically the internet link, the widget, and embed it into your website, or put it on your phone, or put it in some other place where you can get a hold of it, or you can share it with others. This gives everyone kind of the keys to the library to get to this information. But I want to point out a couple other things about this, which I think are also important. As I was mentioning, you can train the avatar. That means that there are actually two data sets. There's an underlying foundational LLM data set, but the more important one is the one that you create that sits above it. So if you think about anytime you ask a prompt, it's going to come down and it's going to hit your data set first, which means you can create as much prejudice, bias, whatever you want to call it, correctness into the answers that the avatar is going to answer. before it may reach out into a general LLM. This allows you to make it custom, unique, having your presence, your tone, your everything you want to talk about in your when it gives a response. And this is in many ways a very, very important aspect of this. And this ties to yet another thing. So I'm going to jump 2 concepts here on you, Emiliano. This is an interactive, generative, conversational AI. It's not a chatbot. And we talk about this all the time. If you go to almost anywhere on the web and you hit an AI agent, an agentic, you're usually talking to a chatbot. And that means that if you ask a question, it already has a pre-scripted answer. And if you don't have a question that it's already been trained to answer, it can't help you. Or it's going to try to force you into a different box and give you the answer to something you didn't ask. And the frustration that everybody experiences is very, very high, because you're going, this is AI, but it's an idiot.
Right.
With Knowledge Avatars AI, you give it all the background information by training. You're not giving it scripts. You're just giving it raw information or information from whatever source, or information about your company, your products and services. And then it answers the question. It simply looks through all this information and says, oh, that's what you're looking for, so here you go. And so now it's given you a very precise one-on-one response in the form of responding to your prompt from your information, about your information, but it doesn't have to be trained in advance. It doesn't have to be scripted to give an answer, because it has an ability to look into everything that is in its data sets and give you the answer that you're asking for.
Right. So I also want to point out that we can also block any access to an LLM. So that, and then the bot would simply say, if the information is not in that database, it would simply say, I don't have that information. I'll have to communicate with Carl and ask him to add it to my database. So we can have that kind of security as well. But it's also important to note that that the AI we're using, which we are using OpenAI's AI at the moment to analyze content. And so you're right. You're adding content in many different forms, and we have a very specific way of adding content based on concepts, and because it's a more intelligent way of structuring knowledge. Concepts are the basic units of knowledge. They're like the atoms of knowledge. So if you connect concepts together, that is a really nice way of creating a database of what it is that you want to what information you want to share with people, rather than just writing prose, writing text.
Right.
And so our engine, the inferential engine, is trying to analyze that. So you ask it a question, it goes through it all and says, oh, this is what he is asking, and this is what here are the answers that I've discovered from this database.
And this again is very important, because now we're changing the paradigm, so to speak, and this is something that I experienced in using AI avatars in an educational course I taught earlier this year at the University of Denver. In that case, I had 3 different avatars who were representing, one was representing an entrepreneur, one was representing an advisor, and one was acting as a teaching assistant to help run interference with all the university rules. Just to be clear for the audience, when you're saying avatars, you mean knowledge avatars. So these are not just we're only using knowledge avatars here. This is a very intentional distinction between this and everything else that's out there, and had a very good experience. The students enjoyed it. What I was trying to do is allow the students to look at a case study in entrepreneurial finance from different perspectives, because all too often I, as the instructor at the front of the room, I have my own perspective, but I also have my own limited knowledge. As much as I know about startup capital and getting new businesses funded, I don't know everything. So with the AI avatar, it's possible for me to reach out and expand that knowledge to everyone who I think is telling the story correctly. I don't let everybody, so to speak, into my personal room here. And it allows the students then to go, oh, this is how this person looks at the problem, or this is how this one looks at the problem. And as good as this all was, I realized that I didn't need 3 avatars in order to do this. And as I'm now working in the development of my new entrepreneurial intelligence services, I can get by with 1 avatar because it can role play anyone who might be involved in a transaction. I don't need 3. I can just say role play an investor, role play a management team partner, role play a vendor supplier, and it puts on the hat and it plays that character that you would ordinarily meet in doing something in your business, and particularly in funding, and it will challenge you. So one of the things I like about the knowledge avatars is that you've got a number of switches you can flip when you set it up. And one of the personalities is a Socratic personality. And Emiliano, why don't you talk more about that and why it's there?
Yeah, well, in learning, you really have 2 ways of, besides all the role playing and all that, the teacher has either is teaching. We're so used to that process of lecturing and of explaining things, or it could take a more what is referred to as a Socratic method, which is where you try to lead the student to understand the concept. So rather than telling them the concept, you try to lead them to come up to the concept themselves. How, what is division? What actually is division? What is multiplication? And try to, and so when the bot has a Socratic personality, it tries to it doesn't explain things. It tries to lead the student to understand things, and it's very powerful. And there are very few teachers who either have the patience or the ability to teach that way, and that is where that is where our system can actually empower a teacher even further and say, listen. If I were teaching physics, for example, I could have a knowledge avatar that is Socratic, and my students could use that to try to understand things a little bit more deeply, especially if it's an AP course or you want some students to really understand. In my college experience, many of my classes, I took every statistics class at McGill, and none of the tests were closed. They were all open book tests because the concepts were so difficult, and the tests were the questions were so difficult that having an answer from a book would not have helped if I didn't really understand it. So that is where where you want to get your students to be. And I think that this is sort of a side topic, but people are worried about AI and how AI is going to is affecting students and allowing students to quote unquote cheat. Well, that's true only as to the extent that you're asking a question and you have one simple answer that you expect your students to have, right? If that is your model of learning, of teaching, then certainly students can use that system. But if you're asking your students to have a much deeper understanding of the content, then they can't cheat, and AI can really help them to dig much deeper into the system. And we're doing that also with the. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then I want to chip in on that because I work with a lot of different groups on the topic of AI and education because of what I do, both commercial education and university education. I'm a member of the Rocky Mountain AI interest group, on AI and their subgroup on AI in education. And most of the challenges that instructors, educators have is that when they use AI, they ask the student to go do something. And the students, being students, are going to ask themselves, what's the shortest, quickest path to responding to this instructor request? And if you frame a question a particular way, it's like the student going to the library, pulling a book off the shelf and putting the book on the instructor's table and going, here you go. That's
Okay.
what you asked for. That's what you get.
Right.
And when you use the Socratic questioning approach, if you ask a question, the student asks a question of the AI, it's going to ask a question back. And this is what is called strategic thinking or critical thinking, an absolute skill that's required for anyone who's going to be working in the future, any job going forward, is they have to understand when AI is a crutch or a shortcut, which is not necessarily doing them any good. It might be, solving somebody's immediate problem, but it's not a long-term solution. And if the question is outside the box, this is the same problem with chatbots. You ask a question for which it doesn't have a scripted answer, you're not going to get an answer. Well, if you ask a student to give you something that's sitting there on the table in front of them, they're just going to give it to you. It's the easy way out. As instructors and educators learn about AI and how it works and how it creates its responses, it's a matter of designing your educational curriculum, your courses, your questions, your assignments, so that the student can use AI, but it's not as a crutch, it's a learning tool. It helps them understand critical thinking, how to look at a problem, take it apart, put it back together, and to move from that question then to things that were not on the table, meaning that this lesson is not a one-time disposable type of an answer. It's a durable, reusable answer they can use throughout their career.
Yeah, we have to remember also that our current educational system was based on the Industrial Revolution, and the goal was to teach as many people skills at the same time that they could use in the factories and in businesses, right? So the idea of having an individualized learning experience where you are focusing on your skills and your needs and your very individual requirements, that was not part of that whole Industrial Revolution. and so today we have the ability to really shift that, and with the gig economy, with so many influencers and people forming their own businesses and becoming entrepreneurs, the whole educational system has to change. And it doesn't mean that the institutions go away, but how those institutions deal with students will change. I came from a system. My college experience was in Canada and at McGill, and McGill is based very much on an English system. So after the first year, we almost never had lectures. It was all seminars and critical and debate and thinking about the deeper issues of each of the subjects, whether it was psychology or education or philosophy. It was all or statistics. It was all about solving a problem and coming up with a solution and being unique about it as well. So that is how I think the American educational system is going to evolve. And people, it just reminds me, people often say things like, "Oh, Steve Jobs was very successful. He dropped out of college." Well, the fact of the matter is, he dropped out of formal college because his parents couldn't afford it. But he actually continued his education and continued going to lectures. And he, for example, there's a famous story of him learning about calligraphy, and that's why we have fonts. That's why we have so many fonts, because famously Bill Gates, I believe it was, said that we only needed like 3 or 4 fonts. But it was Steve Jobs who had learned something outside of the standard curriculum that he would have gone through if he was still in college, by learning something different and something that that changed the way changed his thinking, that made him realize that if you emulated calligraphy, that was a whole other experience with computers. So that is where I think we can go today. We can give students a much more individualized experience and deeper, based on their own capacity and based on their own interests, give them a lot more information and knowledge to work with.
This is probably the most important point of everything we're going to talk about today. It may not be the most interest to everybody, but from my standpoint, one of the things that I learned in working with the AI avatars at the University of Denver course I taught, and looking at lessons learned and going through the rubrics, evaluating student performance, is that when you're in the classroom and I'm standing at the front talking to everyone, we're still engaging in what you would call industrial training. It's one on many. And because of that, you don't get the interaction, you don't get the depth and richness of one-on-one, like me talking with Emiliano right now. This is a unique conversation. We're going back and forth, and it's deeper, richer, and it can go almost anywhere. And this is now a capability of what you can do with a knowledge avatars AI and what I'm doing in my entrepreneurial intelligence system is I realize that I could sit here all day long and I can customize information to early stage entrepreneurs, first funding, specific types of funding. But if it's not in the context of the student, of the business, of the person who is receiving the information, most of it is off target, or it's too early, or it's different. It's something not linking up. It's not syncing up the way it should. So at that point, what I'm doing now with Emiliano is every business that I'm working with in the current field testing of my system, it's like an entrepreneur workforce training program. Each entrepreneur gets their own avatar. And on each avatar, I'm training the avatar not on the world, I'm teaching it on the entrepreneur, their business, their markets. And this is such what should be obvious logical path, but it's a major paradigm shift. It's what they call the blue ocean strategy, whereby bringing that avatar to the point where it knows everything about that entrepreneur and their business, the world looks differently. You're looking through their eyes. You're truly standing in their shoes. And then when you talk to them about raising capital or any type of entrepreneurial activity, they hear you better. They understand it better. There's an engagement. There's a syncing. There's all these positives occur because of that.
So the knowledge avatar is answering questions about the business, and it knows whatever it needs to know about the business at the moment, whatever information exists about that business, it knows, and so it could use that information to help guide the entrepreneur.
Right, and so it's part of what we're learning is how to capture all the information about the business, which includes the bios of the entrepreneurs. It includes basically the bios of customers. Now when you have an engagement with a customer, we ask you to do a video recording of it and take the transcript and put it into the training of the avatar. So it's concurrent, continuous training. It is never out of date. If one of your management team is having a health issue, the avatar knows about that. So it's going to take that into consideration when it answers your question about what do we do tomorrow? Well, you can't do that tomorrow with Steve because Steve's in the hospital this week.
It could also point out, I suppose, the strengths of the company at the moment and the weaknesses, right? So perhaps you need a CFO, perhaps you need somebody who is better at social media.
And so taking this down as deep as we can, I can now go to a business, I can work with the business to gather its information, train it up on its dedicated avatar. And then at any point in the progression of this business, which changes from day to day, I can get it to do 4 different functions, which to me it just kind of blows my mind sometimes. But I can ask it to explain anything. I can ask it to explain one of my concepts or to explain its product. And we can break it down by customer. We can break it down by application. We can break it down by future value, which are all key to raising funding. But then I can turn around and I can go, I want you to do this task. And if the entrepreneur says, I don't understand that, you can ask the avatar to illustrate how this would work. And it's like creating a future fictional story in which you're the lead character, to walk you through this, to say, well, this is how this would work. This is what the process is. This is what you would do and what you have to do along the path. And then to make sure you understood what you just heard, which all too often doesn't happen, you can ask it to quiz you or one of your management team. Do you know how to do this? And it'll give you a series of questions. And if you don't answer them correctly and fully, it's going to give you feedback and says, I'm sorry, but I don't think you understand either this concept or this skill that you have to learn. And then back to role playing. At the end of the day, I can say, okay, I'm going to do this. Please role play a supplier vendor that might also be an investor, and it will talk to me just like we're having a conversation. I don't have to test it in real time, in real life with that vendor supplier. I can practice before I go out and perform. So these are 4 functions that are tailored and ultimately personalized to a particular business. And it's a game changer. There's no way to describe it without using all the cliches. It's a big difference.
And you can ask, I suppose you could also role play like a pitch deck or an elevator pitch, and have it give you feedback on it.
Right. Anything that you want to communicate to anyone, anywhere, anytime, whether it's a term sheet, it's an intro phone call, it's a pitch deck, it can help work through that. It can check your work for you, talk to you about it, give you feedback along the way. So because we're working with a limited time schedule today, and this is for good reasons, we're broadcasting right now live on LinkedIn on my personal profile. So for those of you who were unable to watch this today live stream, you can go to LinkedIn and see the recording. It's also being dual broadcast on YouTube, which is another place you can go back and see a recording. And the new advance is we're now live streaming on SuperCrowd TV. Which reaches an even broader international audience on its own channel. And so we're getting the word out. We're sharing as much information as we can. But the next program on SuperCrowd TV starts at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. So we're going to bow out a few minutes early to give them some time. But in the time we have remaining, Emiliano, we've been talking about education, and we now have an ability to convey information in education through a realistic looking character like Benjamin Franklin. What other applications do you see for using an AI avatar that goes outside of the classroom, and maybe another way to utilize and benefit from AI avatars that look and can talk to you in a conversational style?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that one of the advantages of having a face and a voice is that it is an emotional connection. It really allows you to develop that emotional connection. So one application is living memoirs, which is something that we are also promoting, and we have partnerships for that, and looking for more partners. So a living memoir is essentially your memoir, a memoir of yourself. You put in content, and it's much easier than writing a book. Much easier than writing an essay. You just add concepts about your life, who your kids are, where you were born, what your life is about, what your thoughts are. It's like a diary that you want to publicize. It can look like you. It could sound like you. So we can record your voice, and now you can have a conversation with it. But I'm training my mother's knowledge of living memoir, and believe me, it is very, and my own as well, and it is very emotional. It's very, 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 very striking. That's one application. Another application is with museums, a living docent. So now you can go into a museum, and let's say you're at the Grand Egyptian Museum, and you can upgrade to King Tut, and King Tut can give you details of those exhibits. So you can go to an exhibit, and yes, you'll have a plaque that tells you a little bit about that exhibit, but now you want to know more. Like why did King Tut have this mask, or why did some other artifact? Where does this artifact come from? What are the details of this artifact? So now you can talk to King Tut either in the museum or when you're home at it's on your phone. So the knowledge avatar is on your phone, and you can go into more depth. And again, this is not just general knowledge. This is knowledge that is trained from the museum's artifacts and from the museum's biographies and information. So it's authoritarian. It's stuff that you can trust. And so those are just two applications. Another application is a little bit more fun. I'll give you one more.
Let me make an observation on that. This is an important point, again, with avatars in general or chatbots. When you ask a chatbot a question on an LLM, the only information it has access to, and I say this carefully because we're talking about gazillions of tons of information, is public information. And you're thinking, well, wow, every book ever published, everything, everywhere. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the vast majority, like an iceberg, is below the water. This is proprietary private information. It's your company's information. It's your personal information. None of this is available on the internet. And if you ask any AI about something that reaches into that area, it can't go there. It doesn't have access to that information. Part of the reason for training an avatar on all the information of a business is we're going to get into a depth and richness you can't get with the general public AI. And as Emiliano is pointing out, if you go into a museum, you're going to see everything that's on the wall, everything that's written on the plaques, and you're only seeing the very thinnest veneer of all the information that's available. And an AI avatar can give you that extra reach, that extra depth.
And one final thing, another application is, and I use this for myself, is to have a knowledge avatar of your car manual. It is extremely useful. And I have a QR code on my dashboard. So anything, and the manual doesn't sit in my car anymore. And if I have a question about how do I program the radio, or when was the last time I changed the oil, or what kind of oil I'm supposed to use, or whatever, I just point my phone to that QR code. The bot comes up and says, "Hey, what do you want to know about your car today?" and I'm open to talking to any car company at the moment to have that become part of their system.
Yeah, and so this again suggests 2 or 3 more applications, because if you think about a living memoir, taking all the information of a person, you take all the information that's in that user manual. There are so many jobs today where the workers are aging out, and legacy information about how to fix a particular vehicle, car, aircraft, or whatever, it's in the head of a mechanic and engineer. It's out there, and it's about to disappear into retirement. A business can work with all these people, capture all this information, and now it's there forever. It's not lost upon retirement, upon a health issue that happens. Another side issue or side story on this is what I call the ultimate information repository. I'm currently working with a number of companies in the medical device and healthcare area. And one of the questions is, well, who's done research in this area before? If you search the internet, you can do queries all day long and you might get there, but you're building information that disappears as soon as you're done with the query. If you have an avatar setup, you can bring all that information into the avatar, and instead of you having tried to remember a keyword or the name of the investigator or somebody else, you can simply say, I'm looking for this, and the avatar is going to help you find it because it's unrestricted by what would formerly been called an SQL data query or some other type of database prompt that required skill and training. This removes those barriers and makes all the information you brought in immediately accessible from any direction. You can figure out how to frame the question. And I'm looking forward to marrying this up with my CRM, contact relationship management, because I have a hard time remembering people's names, but I can tell you the business or the technology. And if I say, who did I meet with 2 months ago on ABC Technology, it will be able to tell me, oh, you talked to Joe. Joe is the CEO. Here's his contact information, and I'll be able to find it. So the ability to create personalized information, to bring it down to a level where it's all about you, it's going to benefit you, help you, and so forth. This is more than a chat bot. It allows you to do things that you couldn't do before, things you can't do today with common LLMs. And so it's a big deal. And so, Emiliano, I'm going to ask you for your last comments here before I'm going to try to play one video as we sign off.
Sure. Anybody who is interested in using knowledge avatars to build a business or to teach or to develop a coaching business or other ideas, they can they can email me at emiliano@knowledgeavatars.ai. The website is knowledgeavatars.ai, and they'll get me directly.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do here is I'm going to try to play a video, and we'll see how this works, to invite you to SuperCrowd 26. I'm going to be speaking next week, or actually I'm going to be moderating an interview with Ben, who you saw earlier in the program. And Ben is going to be talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, purpose, and impact investing at this 3-day conference. You're all invited to attend. There is a link there at the bottom of the screen. You can attend for free. You can register at this link, or you can go to SuperCrowd TV and you can download the app. And then the conference will run under the SuperCrowd 26 banner for 3 days. It's August 25th, 26th, and 27th. And let me see what I can do here. This is an experiment. This is me classically doing new things without preparation, but let's see if we can get this tab here to play. And that's not it. So let's stop sharing that tab, and we'll try one more time here, and then I will call it a day because
let me just say thank you for having me, Carl. And you didn't find the link. That's fine.
No, it's one of these things where I'm trying to get multiple technologies to work together. Some days they work great. Sometimes they don't like each other. It's kind of like a small kindergarten class where I never know what I'm going to get some days. But Emiliano, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you to the audience. Hope to see a lot of you at SuperCrowd 26, along with Ben, where we'll have a lot of fun and educational and entertaining voices on innovation and entrepreneurship. And we'll see you all next week on the Successful Funding Show.
Thank you.